diverse international content from Europe, Asia, Africa, and now right here in the USA. Watch us via Roku on your smart TV. Submit your own content to 1530entertainmentllc@gmail.com. Download the Millennium TV app from the App Store to stream our shows anywhere, anytime. Millennium TV.
Hello and welcome to Millennium News TV 24/7 Global News Network. I'm Todd David Goldfinger from Northern Westchester, Mahopac, New York, and here's today's news. A Connecticut newspaper exposed one of the Catholic Church's biggest sexual abuse scandals by reporting 25 years ago Wednesday that 8 men had accused the Reverend founder of the Legion of Christ religious order of raping and molesting them when they were boys preparing for the priesthood. It took a decade for the Vatican to sanction the founder, the Reverend Marcial, and another decade for the Legion to admit that he was a serial pedophile who had violated at least 60 boys. In the meantime, the original whistleblowers suffered a defamation campaign by the Legion, which branded them liars bent on creating a conspiracy to hurt a man considered a living saint. As they mark the quarter-century anniversary of revelations that tarnished the legacy of St. John Paul II, 3 of Maciel's victims are still seeking reparations from the Legion to compensate for the abuse they suffered and the moral harm done to their reputations by the order. They had refused earlier compensation offers that their fellow survivors accepted, and a mediation process begun in 2019 is stalled, according to emails and documents provided to the Associated Press. In other news, pregnancy-related deaths for U.S. mothers climbed higher in the pandemic's first year, continuing a decades-long trend that disproportionately affects Black people, according to the government report released Wednesday. Overall, in 2020, there were almost 24 deaths per 100,000 births, or 861 deaths total, numbers that reflect mothers dying during pregnancy, childbirths, or the year after. The rate was 20 per 100,000 in 2019. Among Black people, there were 55 maternal deaths and 100,000 births, almost triple the rate for white people. The report from National Center for Health Statistics does not include reasons for the trend, and researchers said they have not fully examined how COVID-19, which increases risks for severe illness in pregnancy, might have contributed. The coronavirus could have had an indirect effect. Many people put off medical care early in the pandemic for fear of catching the virus, and virus surges strained the healthcare system, which could have an impact on pregnancy-related deaths, said Eugene DeClercq, professor and maternal death researcher at Boston University School of Public Health. In other news, the jury hearing the case against 3 former Minneapolis police officers charged with violating George Floyd's civil rights needs, only to get instructions from the judge before starting deliberations Wednesday. Prosecutors and defense attorneys spent a full day Tuesday in closing arguments that recapped a month of testimony and sought to sway the jury toward their view of the case. For prosecutors, J. Alexander Kuhing, Thomas Lane, and Tao Thao, in quotes, chose to do nothing, end quote, as fellow officer Derek Chauvin squeezed life out of Floyd. Defense attorneys countered that the officers were too inexperienced, weren't trained properly, and did not willfully violate Floyd's rights. Okay. The 3 are charged with depriving Floyd of his right to medical care when Chauvin pressed his knee into Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes, as the 46-year-old black man pleaded for air before going silent. Kung and Thao are also charged with failing to intervene to stop Chauvin during the May 25th, 2020 killing that was captured on bystander video and triggered protests worldwide and a re-examination of racism and policing. In other news, nearly 2 years after Breonna Taylor's shooting death by police, the only Kentucky officer facing criminal charges in the botched raid will stand trial Wednesday for shooting into Taylor's neighbor's apartment. Brett Hankison, now a former officer, fired 10 shots near a side door during the raid, but none hit Taylor. Prosecutors say the bullets endangered Taylor's neighbors, a couple and their infant child. Hankison's jury was selected from a larger-than-normal pool because of the national publicity Taylor's case has attracted since the deadly raid on March 13, 2020. Taylor's name, along with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, black men who died in encounters with police and white pursuers, were rallying cries during the racial justice protests seen around the world in 2020. The 12 jurors and 3 alternates are expected to tour Taylor's apartment and hear testimony from Hankison during the trial that's expected to take 2 weeks. Several other current and former police officers are expected to testify. The 26-year-old black woman worked as an emergency medical tech and was settling down for bed when Louisville officers with a narcotics warrant kicked in her door. They drew fire from Taylor's boyfriend, who thought an intruder was breaking in. 2 officers at the door returned fire, killing Taylor. Neither one was charged in her death, though one of the officers was struck by a bullet in the leg. We're going to take a short break from the daily English news of Millennium News TV 24/7. Please stay tuned. Thank you.
Millennium TV, bridging communities worldwide. We broadcast diverse international content from Europe, Asia, Africa, and now right here in the USA. Watch us via Roku on your smart TV. Submit your own content to 1530entertainmentllc@gmail.com. Download the Millennium TV app from the App Store to stream our shows anywhere, anytime. Millennium TV.
Hello and welcome back to Millennium TV 24/7 Global News Network. We're here with today's news. President Joe Biden on Tuesday rolled out for the first of what the USA says could be an ever fiercer, ever broader cascade of financial sanctions and penalties over Russia's moves against Ukraine. Today's first installment of sanctions hit members of Putin's inner circle and their families and two banks that the U.S. considers especially crucial to the Kremlin and Russia's military. Another new U.S. measure limits Russia's power to raise money abroad. U.S. officials made clear that they were holding in possible reserve more devastating measures in case Russia escalates actions threatening Ukraine's territory and sovereignty. The Biden administration says those more sweeping penalties could cripple Russia's ability to do business at home and abroad, and likely bring on a recession there in Russia. Here's a look at some of the tougher possible penalties that the U.S. leaders are holding in abeyance. While watching for new Russian steps against Ukraine, the U.S. has yet to fully disclose which of the options it will use. In other news, Russia began evacuating its embassy in Kiev, and Ukraine urged its citizens to leave Russia on Wednesday, as the region braced for further confrontation after President Vladimir Putin received authorization to use military force outside his country, and the West responded with sanctions. Hopes for a diplomatic way out of a new, potentially devastating war in Europe appeared all but sunk as the U.S. and key European allies accused Moscow on Tuesday of crossing red line, enrolling over Ukraine's border in separatist regions, with some calling it an invasion. Russia began pulling personnel from its diplomatic posts in Ukraine. State news agency TASS reported a day after the foreign ministry announced a plan to evacuate, citing threats. By Wednesday afternoon, the Russian flag was no longer flying over the embassy in Kiev, and police surrounded the building. After weeks of trying to protect, calm, Ukrainian authorities also signaled increasing concern on Wednesday. The foreign ministry advised against travel to Russia and recommended anyone there in Russia leave immediately, saying Moscow's, quotes, aggression could lead to significant reduction in consular services. In other news, the leaders of the Senate Judiciary Committee are demanding Attorney General Merrick Garland take immediate action to reform the beleaguered Federal Bureau of Prisons. In response to Associated Press investigations that exposed widespread problems there, a serious misconduct involving correctional officers and rampant sexual abuse at a California women's prison. The committee's chairman, Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat of Illinois, the panel's top Republican, Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, and California Senators Dianna Feinstein and Alex Padilla sent a letter to Garland and Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco on Wednesday. They want the Justice Department to turn over a slew of information about employee misconduct and procedures in place to stem sexual abuse. The letter is the latest illustration of increasing scrutiny of the scandal-plagued Bureau, following the Associated Press's reporting. Last week, the Senate launched a bipartisan working group to focus on the federal prison system, and lawmakers have been introducing legislation to increase oversight of the nation's 122 federal prisons. In other news, clogged U.S. ports are being given access to nearly $450 million in federal money from President Joe Biden's infrastructure law as part of the administration's recent stepped-up efforts aiming to ease supply chain congestion and lower prices for American consumers. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg on Wednesday announced the availability of a first batch of competitive grants for ports that will be double last year's amount annually for 5 years. The grants are aimed specifically at reducing bottlenecks that have slowed the flow of goods to store shelves and pushed up costs. The grants are among several pots of money under the $1 trillion law that the department intends to steer toward providing midterm and long-term relief to the nation's supply chain, which administration officials described as somewhat outdated and broken. Still, acknowledging that the upgrades will take time, Biden officials have largely shied away from any assurances that Americans could see clear and demonstrable changes to their lives before the 2022 midterm elections. We're going to take a short break from the daily news of Millennium TV 24/7. Please stay tuned.
Millennium TV, bridging communities worldwide. We broadcast diverse international content from Europe, Asia, Africa, and now right here in the USA. Watch us via Roku on your smart TV. Submit your own content to 1530entertainmentllc@gmail.com. Download the Millennium TV app from the App Store to stream our shows anywhere, anytime. Millennium TV.
Hello, and welcome back to Millennium TV News 24, Global News 24/7. Today's headlines. Beijing. China is accusing the United States of creating fear and panic over the crisis in Ukraine. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying said Wednesday that China opposes new sanctions on Russia, reiterating a long-standing Chinese position. She said the U.S. was fueling tensions by providing weapons to Kiev in response to Russia's large troop deployment around Ukraine's borders and fears of an invasion. China-Russia ties have grown closer under Chinese leader Xi Jinping, who hosted Russian President Vladimir Putin at talks in Beijing earlier this month. The two sides issued a joint statement backing Moscow's opposition to a NATO expansion in former Soviet republics and buttressing China's claim to the self-governing island of Taiwan. Key foreign policy issues for Beijing and Moscow. Hua said Beijing wants multilateral talks to ease the mounting international tension over Ukraine. She did not mention efforts by the US, France, and others to engage Russia diplomatically. In other news, one by one, embassies and international offices in Kiev closed. Flight after flight was canceled when insurance companies balked at covering planes arriving in Ukraine. Hundreds of millions of dollars in investment dried up within weeks. With Russian troops encircling much of the country, Ukrainian businesses, large and small, no longer plan for the future. They barely can foresee what will happen week to week. It is Ukraine, not Russia, where the economy is eroding the fastest under the threat of war. Even before Russian troops rolled into rebel-held areas in the country's east, and Russian President Vladimir Putin recognized the independence of the separatist region, Ukraine was the biggest loser in the agonizing, slow-motion aggression. I quote, "Why is it that we are suffering consequences already? And Russia, who is actually threatening the whole world in Europe, is not suffering any consequences?" End quote. Asked Andrei Stavnitzer, CEO of the port operator TIS Group. In other news, the International Energy Agency said Wednesday that emissions of the planet-warming methane from oil, gas, and coal production are significantly higher than governments claim. The Paris-based agency said its analysis shows emissions are 70% higher than the official figure provided by governments worldwide. If all leaks were plugged, the methane capture would be enough to supply all of Europe's power sector, it said. The findings underline the urgent need for enhanced monitoring efforts and the stronger policy action to drive down emissions of the potent greenhouse gas, end quote, said. Experts say methane is responsible for almost a third of the temperature increase that had occurred since the start of the Industrial Revolution. The gas remains in the atmosphere for a much shorter period of time than carbon dioxide. However, warming over the coming decades. The IEA said its annual global methane tracker report shows emission from the energy sector grew by almost 5% last year. It said the volume of methane gas leaked to about 100 billion cubic meters of natural gas. In other news, world leaders waited to see if Russian President Vladimir Putin would cast the die and order troops deeper into Ukraine. With Russian lawmakers having authorized Putin to use military force outside of the country, and Ukraine surrounded on three sides by more than 150,000 troops. The rumble of tanks did not appear far off Wednesday. The US and key European allies accused Moscow of having already crossed a red line by formalizing a Russian military deployment to regions of eastern Ukraine controlled by Russia-backed separatists. Ukrainian authorities, after weeks of trying to project calm, signaled increasing concern. Here are the things to know about the conflict over Ukraine and the security crisis in Eastern Europe. Russia, marked defender of the Fatherland Day, a holiday high in national symbolism. On the edge of Moscow's Red Square, soldiers put red carnations on the tomb of the unknown soldier, while Putin honored the memory of the ones who died in past wars. We're going to take a short break from the English daily news of Millennium TV 24/7. Please stay with us.
Millennium TV, bridging communities worldwide. We broadcast diverse international content from Europe, Asia, Africa, and now right here in the USA. Watch us via Roku on your smart TV. Submit your own content to 1530entertainmentllc@gmail.com. Download the Millennium TV app from the App Store to stream our shows anywhere, anytime. Millennium TV.
Hello and welcome back to Millennium News TV 24/7 Global News Network. Today's news. The World Health Organization is creating a global training center to help poor countries make vaccines, antibodies, and cancer treatments using the messenger RNA technology that has successfully been used to make COVID-19 vaccines. At a press briefing in Geneva on Wednesday, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said the new hub will be in South Korea and will share mRNA technology being developed by WHO, World Health Organization, and partners in South Africa, where scientists are working to recreate the COVID-19 vaccine made by Moderna Incorporated. That effort is taking place without Moderna's help. Vaccines have helped to change the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, but this scientific triumph has been undermined by vast inequities in access to these life-saving tools, end quote, Tedros said. It's the first time that World Health Organization has supported such unorthodox efforts to reverse engineer and commercially sold vaccine, making an end run around the pharmaceutical industry, which has largely prioritized supplying rich countries over poor in both sales and manufacturing. In other news, Hong Kong residents are becoming increasingly annoyed with the administration's insistence on sticking to China's zero COVID strategy, as the city posted another record number of cases Wednesday, bristling at ever stricter regulations and a plan to test everyone for the virus. Schools have already switched to online learning, and summer holidays are being moved forward so that the buildings can be used as facilities for testing, isolation, and vaccination. Hong Kong says it will go ahead with a plan to test every one of its 7.5 million residents 3 times in March. Under the zero COVID-19 strategy, every person testing positive cases must be quarantined in a hospital or other government facility for 14 days, regardless of symptoms. It's in contrast with most countries, which are reducing restrictions and allowing people with mild or no symptoms to remain at home. The world knows we have to live with the virus. Only the Hong Kong government does not know, said taxi driver Chen Tai-man. Actually, it's not that they don't know, they only do what the Chinese government tells them to. End quote. In other news, South Korean health officials on Wednesday approved Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for children aged 5 to 11, expanding the country's immunization program in the face of a massive Omicron outbreak that is driving up hospitalizations and deaths. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency reported a record 171,452 new cases of the virus on Wednesday, nearly a 40-fold increase from levels in mid-January when Omicron first emerged as the country's dominant strain. The 99 new deaths were the highest daily since December 31st, when the country was grappling with a Delta-driven surge that buckled hospital systems. More than 500 virus patients are now in serious or critical condition, up from around 200 in mid-February. In a long-awaited announcement, the Ministry of Drug and Food Safety said it approved the Pfizer vaccine as the country's first shot to be used for children 5 to 11. The KDCA said it will announce a vaccine rollout plan for this age group in March. Pfizer shot is already used for children aged 5 to 11 in more than 60 countries, including the United States and in the European Union. The MDFS said in a press release, the vaccine will help protect younger children from infections or serious illness among South Korea's fast-developing Omicron surge, it added. In other news, And Emperor Naruhito, marking his 62nd birthday on Wednesday, called on people to keep the fire of hope burning in their hearts and support each other to overcome the challenges posed by the coronavirus pandemic. Naruhito said his heart aches thinking about people who have lost their jobs, struggling financially, or felt isolated due to the pandemic. I quote, "The difficult situation has persisted, but I strongly believe that it is possible that we can overcome the severe reality with patience by caring for each other, sharing each other's pain, and by making efforts to support each other," Naruhito said at a palace news conference held ahead of his birthday. His birthday greetings to the public at the palace were canceled for a third year, and a palace ceremony was also scaled down because of the pandemic. Naruhito said his daughter, Princess Aiko, who studies Japanese literature at Gakushuin University, has been taking classes online due to the coronavirus. Recalling his time at college, where he constantly had new discoveries and experiences, such as meeting people in classes and sharing a table at a cafeteria with other students, Naruhito said he hopes his daughter also can enjoy a post-pandemic campus life. This has been the daily global news update of Millennium News TV 24/7. Please log in to get the latest news on all of our social networking sites: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. On TikTok, we are Millennium News 24. Also, our YouTube channel is News Channel M24. Viewers, now both on network broadcasting, Android and iOS devices, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV. Also, all smart TV platforms. Please enjoy our entertainment and our latest news, views, current events, our Millennium TV apps. Millennium TV USA on Android, Millennium News Google it. www.millenniumnews24.com. Stay with us. Millennium News 24. Thank you so much. My name is Todd David Goldfinger, and it is my pleasure to do the news for you. Thank you.